Okay, right. Now we'll see what is XML and why do we use the main syntaxes of the XML. We'll see now.
Hmm.
See, XML basically used for XML we can use for the transportation purpose, and let's say in web services, what we are doing in web services, the client will be sitting at some places, other places, and like the server will be sitting in some other places. Client is sending a request. So most of the times, right, when you're using a SOAP web services, you will be using the data protocol as XML. So means your when the client send a request, the data will be transferring or sending through a space channel. Means you are sending the XML or using to transportation purpose, or even you can consider this as storage purpose. Like when you sometimes, right, when you see any real time requirement where there will be one table will be there. Inside the table there will be a specific data type will be there. Like if you are going for insurance project, right? So when you are going for a bank account, or you are going to bank to open a new account, what they will do, they will ask you application. Okay, once they're done, right, they'll store your application in the database also. Because when you go bank, right, they'll verify your photo also sometimes. If required signature, they'll
Correct.
verify. But how come they are verifying the signature? There will be a specific field in a database is called, that which one column itself they can store a GB of data also. There is one called as a LOB data, large object data types. These are specific data types in database, large object data type, data objects. There we have CLOB and BLOB, character large objects, binary large objects. This character large objects basically used, right, in whenever you go for any project, right, any project. You if you are using a common requirement will be, if you are using a logging framework. Okay, the logging framework, what we need to do whenever having an exception or logging will be required, you need to have a payload information or complete error tracing information. So a payload means will be having a huge size. It might be 1 KB, 2 KB, 20 KB, depends on that. So you need to store that data. In that, whatever the XML you're coming, you directly load that all the payload into this particular column. This is one of the type of the column data type called character log object.
Hmm.
So in this column, you can store, I think this is for this column, this one column can store a data of 1 GB data type, 1 GB storage, one column. These are the special data types in databases. Normally what we'll do when you define a customer name, one column name will be giving some characters, 20 characters or 30 characters. Some specific fields, there it requires huge number. It means you are using XML for storing purpose also. XML can be used for transfer purpose as well as storing purpose. When you say BLOB, right, binary large objects, nothing but you will maybe you storing the any data files, might be image files. Like when you're going for loan processing or anything, right, they will be store your image or signature, all these things in a BLOB data types. Okay, those XML will be used for storing and transportation purpose. These are the thing. And there is another thing called HTML. Basically, XML is HTML basically used for displaying purpose. Display nothing but when you have a web page, right? So how do you want to display your web page? That kind of that kind of information you will do with HTML. But in HTML, there is a difference between HTML and XML is XML can be used for the transportation purpose, and HTML can be used only for display purpose. And XML, you can define your own tags. You can define your own tags. But whereas HTML, you have a predefined tags. Like if you want to display a title, a huge size contents, then you need to write H1, H2. Like there are predefined tags. But XML, right? You see, you can see in the sample XML, all these tags are as per our requirement. We have given a namings. There is no specific predefined tags. We can define our own tags in XML. That's the advantage of XML. So there
So basically, XML transportation purpose ki we only మనం XML use చేస్తాం, right?
right,
So
right.
like,
So all we will do here is because when we'll be using client and server architecture purpose, and then we'll be using XML most of it. Not only in this integration tool, all the integration tool will be using XML, most of the integration tools.
okay.
So that's the reason if you have an XML knowledge, right? So even you can easy for you to learn other integration tools as well.
Mhm.
Because XML is not a specific like a language. It's not a specific language. It's independent of the language. You can say universal. You can use in Java. You can use in PHP. Anywhere you can use it. So that's the reason that the integration tools has built based on the open standard technologies. The XML, WSDL, all these are open standard XML. So these are based on these protocols only. They have developed this integration tool. Most of the integration tool.
Yeah, Vema, I'm not too sure about what WSDL or SOAPs or RESTs are. I didn't work much on those things, so
Okay,
just in case
we'll
if you
show
are
you
aware.
that one. We are WSDL, right? When we are dealing with web service concepts, right?
Okay,
We'll show you that what is WSDL and what is REST and what is SOAP. So because those are belongs to the web services, and those are also open standard. But we'll when we are dealing with open web services topic, we can see that those things.
okay,
So in XML, yeah, we'll just leave about HTML. Now only XML. XML have there are certain types of rules you need to follow. There is a every XML there is a PI. We can call it as a processing instruction. It has the processing instruction is required. It should be first line. Processing instruction means suppose if I feed this XML to some application, how the application will be able to identify this particular file is an XML by reading the first line as a we can call the first line as a processing instruction. You have to be this is XML file is must and should have to keep like this only. XML version optionally even you can provide an encoding also. Even you can provide optional encoding also. This is what we can call it as a processing instruction. If you feed this file to any application, the first application by looking at the first line of the file content, the application will able to identify this is an XML file. So that's the reason we need to have the XML pre-processing instruction is mandatory. Pre-processing instruction is if some of the applications if you don't provide it, they will add it. So when you generate an XML, each every application they will generate the pre-processing instruction when you're generating an XML files. So the XML, I'm just giving some of the rules. It has to be followed. And then
okay,
every open tag, and one more thing is entire document should have only one root element. Okay, first we'll see before we go into this line, we'll see what is element. Okay, what is a complex element and what is simple element. See, the simple element in the sense anything can be an element here. Everything is an element here. And this is what inside the element, this is also an element. Inside element, if you define anything, this we can call it as attribute. I'm just giving you the
okay,
terms. Attribute always follows name and then value pair. Always it follows a name value pair. This is also an attribute. But these are the syntaxes of the namespaces. We can say these also an attributes. But these values, these attributes describes the value. These attributes describes the type of XML namespace. Okay.
okay,
So what you need to understand what is element and what is attribute. Name element nothing but will be in a open and closing tags, and attributes will be always resides in open tag only. And also attributes follows name and value pair. Okay, then we'll see what is element and what is element. Everything is an element, but when we can call this particular element as a simple element and when we can call this particular element as a complex element. So if you see the element, if there is no child elements, there is no child elements, then we can call this as a simple element. If you see the other, title, genre, price, update, review date, these all things are, we can call it as a simple element. Why we are calling a simple element? Because these elements did not have any child elements. And whereas if we consider the book, right, book is a complex element. Why we are calling it a complex element? One of the reason, it has an attribute. It's either, when we can call an element called a complex element is if an element has either an attribute or child elements, one or more child elements. If you click on here, right, you can see that these all are defined inside book. You can see inside, how I am saying inside book, it starts open tag and it's closed with open tag book. It means that these all are all are child of book. Means when we have a child elements, then we can call this particular element as a complex element. You can say book is a complex element. Why? Because it has around 4 to 5 child elements. Whereas other, we can call it as a simple element because there is no child elements. And if you see books also a complex element. Books also a complex element. Let's coming back to this point. So what I'm saying, entire document in the sense entire file, you can say entire file should have only one root element. One root element, nothing but it should be on top level. Where is the top level? This one. When you collapse this, you should have entire document. You should have only one root element. This is a valid XML. If you define like this, right? If you define like this is not a valid XML because, and as I said, the well-formed XML should have only one root element in a document. Since it has two root elements in a two root elements, so this is not a valid one. Inside the root element, you can define n number of elements. There is no restriction on that. You can see in one book, you can see n number of books. You can place 100 books also, 1000 books also, 1 lakh also. There is no restriction on this. But entire document should have only one root element. This is another rule. So all XML should, when you define an XML file should satisfy two properties. One is well-formed XML, other one is valid XML. Well-formed XML means, as the name implies, well-formed. It basically verifies the syntaxes, whether it's have you defined the XML file as per syntaxes or not. So what are the syntaxes? The first thing would be processing instruction, whether the XML file should have a processing instruction or not. Once you define a processing instruction, then you should have every entire document should have only one root element. After that, every open tag should followed by closed tag respectively. Means wherever you open tag, you have to close that closed tag. If you define open tag and the XML file did not have a closed tag, right, then it's not a well-formed. It shows an error saying that it didn't find a closing tag matching with the open tag element.
Okay.
And other thing also, as I said, the XML element names are not a predefined. We can define, it's user defined, but this element name should not start with numeric. It can be a alphanumeric, but it cannot start with a numeric. So these are these are some basic one. And these, if you build an XML file, if you write an XML file by satisfying these criteria, then we can say XML file as well-formed XML. Should have a processing instruction. Also, it has an only one root element should be available. Every open tag should have a closed tag, and also element names. Element names should not start with names. Not
Numeric.
numbers. and even it can start with even valid here is even underscore also valid, underscore also valid. You can define underscore name, underscore you can define, but element names, but element name should not start with the numbers. So if you define an XML file by satisfying these four criteria, then we can call this as a well-formed XML. But okay, right, well-formed XML is fine, but when we can say valid XML file? So the valid XML file is if any XML file that satisfies a property of valid XML, it internally satisfies the well-formed XML as so. If any XML satisfies well-formed XML, it even satisfies well-formed XML also. But reverse is not true always. If any XML file is a well-formed XML file, it may or it may not be a valid XML.
Hmm.
So how do you validate an XML file? How do you validate an XML? XML file can be validated against two metadata structures. One is called DTD. We can call it as document type definition, and XML schema definition. And in short,
Metadata exactly ఏంటి అంటే
yeah,
what level?
see, let's say you have a table, you know just what idea, right? So you have a table.
Hmm.
Okay, you have
Mhm.
created a table. So you have created a table with 4 columns, and you are trying
Mhm.
to insert the data into the table with 5 columns. Will it be inserted?
No.
It will throw an error, because you are, but did the table is anything useful? Table is not useful, or useful data would be records inside a table. It means a table is a metadata here. It is just do kind of some validations, and it represents the way how you are inserting the data. All the data will be organized in like so rows and columns and cells.
Mhm.
Similarly here this is also not useful for any real time with all the real time they'll define schemas means see like let's say a simple example is I'm telling that I need to insert there is a one scenario, let's say outbound scenario where I'm getting some records from the Salesforce, and then I need to generate a sample CSV file.
Mhm.
But this is a sample CSV, we are saying sample CSV file, but the client will not give us the in what format we need to generate a file, or what format will be getting an XML from the Salesforce. Then it will be very difficult to do the development of our process. But they have to finalize the what is the structure they are coming. The structure is nothing but the structure information will be defined in metadata. When I say structure, when the Salesforce is sending these many data, and we need to specify what and all elements they are sending. Each and every element, how many times it will repeat it. What is the data type of each and every element. If you know these things, yes, we can build a profile, and based on that, you can map it. You can translate the same data to a flat file. Means metadata basically defines you the type of an elements and number of elements and structure of data, and using this data we can build our design time logic. We can build our design time logic. At runtime the file will be coming, and the file will be validating against this metadata structures. If the XML file is not compliant to the metadata structure, then it will throw an error. If it is in validated against the metadata structure, then the files will be generated. But here what I told you here is, here I told that this XML file basically stores books information. Okay, books information. But if I say that book has how many number of these elements? Book has around four, or one, two, three, four, around 6 elements. But if I add
Mhm.
one more element, if I add one more element, then if I go for validation, because the XML file is a physical file, it's actually data will be there. But if you want to validate this XML file, you have to validate this XML file with any one of the metadata. First we'll see what metadata, then we'll explain the what is that one. See this is the document type definition. Earlier what happened, sir, this we are using, this is the old standard document type definition. Because we are not using this one, so now we are using the latest one called XML schema definition. Why we
Okay.
are using this one is for validating the XML files. The common reason would be the DTD did not have a much data types to represent the different types of a data. Like if you go for Java, right, you have a many data types to represent the boolean, to represent the float, to represent the long int, small int, short int, and then you have the character, string, date time, time. You have different types of data types, but the DTD did not have a different types of data types to to define a structure with more validations. Okay, let's say if I define one field called customer ID with a string type, with an integer type.
Mhm.
Let's say I define integer type. But when client send, and based on that I have defined my process. But if my client sends me the customer ID with the character types, then my process will throw an error. Because at metadata level, I have specified this particular element should be of this type. If you're sending a different types, then validation will be failure here itself. Then processing will be
Mhm.
stopped at the starting itself. It means that if you should be having a proper metadata structure that should allow n number of validations. That's because it did not have the DTD did not have the much data types for representing the more data types, more data. So we are not using this data type. This is DTD. And the latest one we are using a XML schema definition. This is XSD. It supports all data types as similar as Java. All primitive data types, whatever the primitive data types are there, it can support all XML, all primitive data types. And in short, we can call it as a either schema. We can call in short we can call it as a schema, or we can call it as a XSD. We can call it as. This metadata also will be defined, all the metadata information will define in a file called .dtd extension file. This will be defined in an extension file called .xsd. Okay, so let's
Mhm.
see what exactly, when I say how, because when I say validate XML file against this one, what exactly the metadata will be having. So the valid XML in the sense, when you define some XML elements inside that, these are all the XML, whatever this is an XML file. This is an XML file. Whatever the elements you define, whatever the elements you are going to define, you have to put that in a XSD. This is what you have to define in XML file. What will be having? What is the element name? What is the value? Whether it should accept this value for this particular element or not, that information you are specifying in metadata. We can say all rules. Okay, all rules we are specifying that. Whether you can see here, and another thing is here the price information it is showing boolean, it's a floating point value, decimal value. Whether the price
Mhm.
should accept the integer type or number type, a long int, a short int, or uh, uh, like a floating point, what type of a data it should store, that actually defines in metadata. That is the reason the metadata is have all the complete details about the structure. And if you see this one, this is a repeated multiple times, book element is, whereas the title is not repeated. So whether it should be accepted or not, even those kind of rules also will be defined in an XSD. Means all the metadata will be defining how many number of the fields you are going to define, and elements you are going to define, and what is the structure of these elements, and what are those data types. All that will be defining in XSD. And basically this XML file, when they will be sending XML file for our process to be run at runtime, they will be sending. But how we have to design our process based on the XSD, because this XSD we have all the metadata. Based on this XSD only they will be sending an XML file. So if you have an XSD, we can create this XSD. We can use this XSD to create a profiles in a data in Boomi, and we can do our logic.
Mhm.
So this is why we are going and giving all the details is we can create a different types of profiles here. When you go here, profiles, You can see that XML profiles. When you want to go XML profile, even you can create a profile manually. Even you can create a profile automatically by importing sample files. For the importing purpose, I'm just showing all these details. I'll show you
Okay.
this. I'll show you. Okay. Now we just need to understand what this XSD means. It's a metadata structure. So it contains XSD contains a metadata information. What metadata it will contain? Like whether how many, what is the structure of the XML file you are going to define, and what how many number of elements that you are going to define, and what is the data types for each and every element, and how many number of times this particular elements will be repeating. Okay, even XSD also an XML file. Okay, XSD also an XML file. XSD also an XML file. You have to, it should be there. Then if it is not there, it accepted, but it should be ideally should be there when you're creating an XSD. You will be, the pre-processing instruction will be there. And after that, there are certain types of predefined namespace. We can call it as a namespace. See, I think you are aware of the Java if you are aware. So how do you identify the particular classes in Java? Based on the package name. Based on the package name. You can consider a package as a folder, and you can consider the classes as a files in a folder. Means if you are trying to copy paste the same file inside a same folder, will it be accepted? It will not accept. It will create a duplicate file. You create a different name. It means that in one package, in one folder, you are not going to create a same file name, this same type of file name. Similarly, in the but when you are defining, but how the uniqueness is maintaining based on the folder name. Similarly here, when you have a multiple XML files, how that XML, entire XML file will be identified by the system is based on the namespace. We can call it as another thing called namespace. After this, you just go through some of the document tutorial will be have more clear. Namespace.
Mhm.
What is a namespace is in we can just say that a namespace is similar to what we define in package in Java. So let's say you have a one XML file. Okay, in XML file you have a customer ID you define, and you have another XML file where you define customer ID again. But when I pass a customer ID, how should my system be able to identify whether it should take from the first XML file or second XML file? The compiler should be able to resolve the naming differences, right? So that naming
Mhm.
results will be identified with the name called namespaces. Each and every XML file, entire XML file will be identified with the namespaces. If the same value, same element name is available in the same namespace, it will throw an error. For every XML file, there should be a one namespace. If you see, I'll show you how it looks like a namespace. This is what we can say namespace. Namespace will always follows a pattern of again name value pair. This is what we can call it as XML namespace. And it's nothing but XML namespace.
Yes.
XML namespace, and then this is a value. And if you just click on this one, I'm just telling that these all elements, books, right? Books. This is the books element is defined inside this namespace. So each and every time if I can put this one, right? Sometimes namespace will be lengthy. If I directly
Mhm.
put in each and every time, right? It will be difficult for me to define each and every time because it's a lengthy. So what I can do, I can give an alias or prefixes for this namespace. So using this prefix, I can tell you that, okay, this is a, when I say URN books, for this is a prefix. All namespace of XML and NS will be colon, then you can give the prefix. The prefix can be anything, even you can give anything. When you click on this, what and all elements have referred this prefix means all these elements have defined in this particular namespaces. This is how it will be identified. Even if you have defined the same element, but same element will be having a different namespaces. So based on the namespace, it will go and identify which XML file you have defined this particular element. That's how this will be resolved. Okay, there was some just history about this namespace. Why do we, how the structure will be specified. So as I told you that namespaces should be unique. Namespaces should be unique. The common format for specifying the namespaces would be URL format. URL, the web URL format. Why they'll define URL format is, see, each and every website is an different, right? It's unique. It's a
Sure.
unique queue. That's the reason the common practice is they'll be defining the namespaces with URL format. Here you just define it URL books. Even you can type your name also. There is no restriction on specifying what there is a specific syntax to be followed these namespaces. You can give anything. But the common practice to be used is a URL, HTTP URL. Anything you can give. Okay, if you just go and open any one of these anyway, and let me open one of the things. Okay, you can see namespaces would be of some URL. So because why the URL will be a unique queue always. That's the only reason they'll be considered as a URL. It is not a mandatory. It's just a recommended. It's a best practice. Okay, there is another thing why they'll follow the namespace value to be always in URL format is in real time. What they will do, uh, they will be storing this XSD file, XSD, nothing but schema definition file. All this XSD file in their organization, every organization they'll be having a repository tools, so revision control tools to store their project source code.
Mhm.
Project source, every project they'll be having a revision control systems where they'll maintain all the revisions of their code. What they can do, because if you directly type this one, right, so if you directly type this one, you won't get it. We are just defining it and make sure it should be an unique queue. That's the reason we are defining namespace value in terms of an in terms of an URL format. But if I directly click on this one, right, you won't get anything because this is not a valid URL. What they will do in some of the projects in real time, they will be giving the namespace value itself. They'll be giving the namespace value itself, the location of this particular file they have stored on their repository. Let's say if they stored on repository at some particular places, let's say this might be the repository URL for their system and this might be the folder, okay, in their system. If sometimes what they will do, they'll give this URL like this, and they store wherever the XSD or metadata file stored in their repository, the same URL they'll be giving as a namespace value here. So when in that case, when they click on this URL, automatically the entire schema file will be open. These are the two reasons why they'll commonly use the namespace value as an URL format. One is to maintain a uniqueness. Other one is to store the particular metadata structure in that particular URL, so that the entire your file will be accessible at that URL. That only possible when you keep your XSD at that particular URL place. Ideally, they'll be each and every organization they'll be having a revision control systems will be there. In the revision control system, what they will do, each and every time when you do a code changes, they'll be maintaining the revisions of a code. So the schema also will be stored as part of a project. What they will do, wherever the schema is stored, they'll take that URL and they'll put that URL into here. So in that case, even it will be more easy even for the clients also, whoever sharing it to external application stream, they can tell you that, okay, this is the schema of, this is the structure of your schema, my schema. You can access it from here. You shall be sending an email. All this XML file attaching an email, you can just share this address so that they'll directly hit in browser, they'll get complete schema structure.
Mhm.
This is the why they'll go for common practice. So namespaces. Okay, as I told, the namespaces would be used to identify the entire schema. If you now we'll go through this. What and all elements we define? What and all elements we define? Book, books. Under book we have certain elements. Same thing what we
Mhm.
can see here. 1 second. If you want to work with XML tools, right? If you want to work with XML tools in this is what we can call it a pretty print. Pretty print nothing but each element should be in separate new line. It automatically arranged based on the hierarchy structure. hierarchy structure. You can see wherever it started, same ending at the same level here. So it looks to be more readable format. So if you want to work with an XML plugin, right, the Notepad++ have a XML plugins. If you want, just click on the plugins, go for plugin
Mm-hmm.
manager, go for plugin manager, click on show plugin manager, and it will show the list of plugins available for the Notepad++ in available tab. And you just go back, come down completely, you can see an XML tools. So because I already installed here, it will be showed under installed XML tools. So you can see the XML tools, click on that. Let's say I want to install, this is the one. Click on this checkbox, click on install. It will just take a minute to download and it will reopen your Notepad++. After that, you would be able to find the plugins here directly because all these are plugins. That's the reason you can see. Even you can use a compare. The frequently why we use the Notepad++ is one is for comparison. You can use a comparison also one of the plugin. You can compare the file side by side, and even you can use XML tools like see now I'm even if install the XML tools, you'll be getting all these things. If you want to validate whether this is an syntax is properly or not, then when you click on this one, enable syntax, then it will verify that it is a well-formed XML. But when do we say it's a valid XML? When XML file is defined as per the schema. That's what this is, a schema. But when I say XML is defined as per schema, in the sense whatever the elements are available inside XML file should also be available in the schema, as well as it has to be defined the values as per the data types in schema. Let's try to correlate one of the things. Okay, just go for book schema. We have defined a book. Okay, here this is defining XSD also will be required, but it will be more difficult if I told you these things, you will not able to grasp it. But if you
Mm-hmm.
need it, I'll tell you later, because defining it will be there is a certain types of a predefined tags. Like if you're just going for Java, right, you'll be writing a for loop or another loop, but you need your there is a document that gives you the complete structure of what and all elements are available. Okay, now if you just open the Google, if you just want to learn XSD, right, but it will be useful anyway. You're not only this one, because XSD is not much useful here in Boomi. If you go for any other integration tool, XSD is much useful. Okay, XSD tutorial. If you just Google it XSD tutorial, you'll get it these things. Or if you just Google it XML tutorial, you'll get the list of these things. Okay, XML tutorial, you'll get this one. Even it will show the list of these things. You can see XML home, XML introduction, how to use, and then you can see the DTD. As I told you that it's a DTD. Document type, XML document validated against DTD is both well formed and valid. Instead of DTD, will be using XSD. That's the only thing. So an XML document validated against XML schema is both well formed and valid. And then you can, if you want, you can just go through this XML schema, and then you can see how the XML schema is defined. If you like, if you see there is an there is an XML, you need to understand. If you understand, it will be good. It's not mandatory that you need to understand schema also, but let me give you the one of the simple thing here. I have a defined an element called book. What is a book? Is a simple element or complex element? It's a complex element because
Complex,
it
yeah.
has the some child elements. We'll correlate it
Hmm.
soon. Okay. The first element, what is the first element you define? Is you define an element. But one thing you need to understand here is it's not mandatory that you need to follow a sequence. You can define a sequence, but end of the time there will be having only one root element that you will be defining here. Okay, let's go here. We have element because it's an element. It doesn't matter whether it's a simple element or complex element. Books also an element. This is a books
Okay.
element. Okay, right, books and element, same thing I have defined, because these are the predefined type you need to define. XSD element, when I say XSD element, it automatically represent whatever the name you given, that will be accepted as an element name in XML file. That is the reason each and every time when you define an XML, you will be defining an element called XSD element, XSD element, XSD element. Means you are going to define an element, because as I told you that XML in XML element names can be user defined, not predefined. That is the reason you need to specify, right, what is the element name you are defining. If it is a predefined, you don't need to put all these things in XSD. Since it is an user defined type, you need to specify some content where these are the things valid things. These are not valid. So that's the reason we are defining XSD element, the name pub date. Nothing but we what this line will be defining. It creates an element called pub underscore date, published date of what is the date, what is the element data, what is this type of a data this particular element should accept. It should accept only the date types only. If you go for price, it accepts float values only. This is the why each and every element they specified the what kind of a data it's to store it. So when you validate this with XML file, if your XML file is not defined as per this data types, then it's an error. That's the reason XML XSD have all this metadata information. Now let's just correlate this. We have an element called books, and what is the structure of the books? This is the structure of the books. Books from. Even we can directly define like this. Then we can directly, if you just open a small thing here, right? I am defining an element here. Under element, what are elements will be having? To, from, heading and body. Like in XML file, you will be having, let me just show you, because it would be more simple, because when I open larger one, it will be more come. See, this is an XML file, how it looks like. This is an XML file. What this XML file have? Pre-processing instruction, pre-processing instruction called XML version, and then I have a root element called node, and then I have some child elements called to, from, heading and body. Okay, but let's see the corresponding schema, what it is defined. What are all elements we have? Node, to, from, heading, body. Out of all these, what is it? Node is the only complex element. So that, okay, let's define an element name node. Element node, name node. Since this element is a complex element, we are adding these two tags, complex tag. Okay, since this element is a complex element, we have to add. Now next we have to define under this element what are all elements we have? To, from, heading, body. And what is the type? You define by default everything you define as string type. But whether in this, when you are validating this XML file against this schema, if you directly cut this two element as a second after from, then again it will throw a validation error, even though it is as per it, because in this node you already defined first it has to be available to, and after that you have to be available from. What that saying that you have to follow sequence, this is the one you are following a sequence, means that under node, so node is a complex element. Under the node, you may be defining a n number of elements, but if you are all n number of elements are enclosing in sequence tags, it means it has to follow the same sequence in XML file also. Otherwise, it will throw an error. Right. So this is how we can define an element, complex element here. But if, like, let's say I wanted to use some of the elements called node, from, heading, because if these are the predefined types, you can see that predefined types all are primitive types, string, integer, number, boolean, all these things. But I wanted to define a user defined type. Let's say I wanted to use this node element in multiple places. Maybe I just wanted to use a customer node as a remarks node, something. I wanted to use this structure at different places. But you define all these places at in nested, right? These elements are not visible because these elements are only visible within the node element, because it's a scope. That is the reason what we are doing here is, this is how actually should be defined. But if you see an XSD, right? But we have defined using a type. We did not define immediately after element name books. We did not define complex type sequence. We did not define. We just referred it books. And the books again we have defined it. Means that we have defined here again. The books from is we define same structure, complex type, and then sequence, an element, we define it. The way you defining these types, right? This will be a reusable types. It means that if I define a customer books, again another element, I can define an element. I don't need to define all this structure again. I can directly differ just an add element. This will be a bit complex for you to understand it, but
Yes.
try to understand it. And I'll be showing using these two files. I'll be creating an XML profiles, creating an XML profiles, and I'll show you the difference. What is the difference, and when importing an XML profile, when importing an example XML file, how it will be, when importing XSD, how it will be.
Okay.
What and all I was trying to do, book is of type, this is a type. In this type, what and all elements you define, book is a defined, and how many times you define max occurrence, nothing but how many number of times this particular book should be repeated. You already cleared unbounded. Unbounded is a predefined value to say infinity values, because you can see book is defined. Even you can define n number of times here, infinity times you can define book. It's valid. Means under books you are defining a books here. Books, we are defining a book. Book can be any number of times repeatable. And what is a book structure? Book from. These all elements it has it. Like the XSD it has the all the elements, whether what kind of a data it should store, how many number of times the element should be repeated, and also one more thing you need to understand, target namespace. This is a namespace, and all this scheme, all these things has to be defined in a namespace called books. If you don't give these things, it will give an validation error. That is the reason we are validating always an XML file against the schema. To check all these characteristics of an XML file, we are validating this and XML XSD to check whether these particular files are defined in this particular namespaces or not, and then whether these
Okay.
elements have been defined in the schema or not, and these elements as defined as per the data type or not. We will do all these things. Now we know what is XML and what is XSD. At least some content you might have understand what is an XML, what is an XSD. XSD is just a metadata. It will not have any
Correct.
data. Just used for building or logic at design time. At runtime, you will be getting an XML file. That XML file will be matching the XSD. You can consider XSD is a table structure, create a table structure in database, and XML file will be control like your actual data that will be going to inserting into your table. If you are created a schema with the different elements and you are trying to define XML with another elements and you are trying to validate, it will give an error. The way how if you define a 4 elements in this database and you are trying to insert a record with the 5 values into the same database, it will throw an error because one column is already extra. That kind of validations it will be enforcing with the schema here. Now let's go and create a schemas type here. Let's go and create we can say book XML profile. If you have time, right, you can just go through this one XML W3 schools or another thing called uh, tutorial points, right? Tutorial points. You can just go through this one if you have time. It will be useful. Definitely it will be useful. Not only Boomi, if you know this one, it will be more understanding in Boomi also.
Okay.
XSD tutorial. I have already showed you what is simple types, what is complex type. Simple types, nothing but simple element or complex element. Already showed you XSD syntax, how it will be. Or you just go through this one, you'll have a good understanding on what is XSD on all the things.
Mm.
And if you still, if you have not have a clarity, and then we can check it, we can explain tomorrow. But
Okay.
whatever it's required for Boomi, I'll definitely give you all this knowledge. Okay, then
Okay.
I'm just defining a profile type, a profile type called book XML profile, because in this session we'll just show you how to create a profile, and the next session what we'll do, we'll just take a CSV file. We'll just read a
Mm-hmm.
CSV file, and I'll show you how to convert the plot file into an XML file using the Boomi.
Okay.
So because in real time you may have a different types of transformations will be required. Let's say you are getting the common requirement would be uh, let's say success factors. Okay, you might be having one system called success factor. You need to extract all the employee details from success factor, and then you need to generate a flat file with all the employee details. It means you are converting here XML to flat file. We are showing flat file to XML. Similarly, you can do vice versa. This
Mhm.
the common requirement would be available. This type of a data transformation will be required. So that I'll be showing you tomorrow, but today I'll be showing how to create a profiles, because the profiles will be mandatory to do a transformations. That's the reason I'm going to show you the profile here.
What exactly is profile in Boomi, Lema? How do you
See,
define it if you have to definition wise?
profile is a metadata. Using the profile, it specifies of what and all data you will be processing through this process. And without a profile, let's say you have read an XML file, okay, whatever you have read a CSV file, okay, if you read a CSV file, let's say you have read a CSV file of this one, you can see that by looking at the file, CSV file has multiple records, multiple customer. You can see this is the customer information, customer ID, customer name, and number of orders, and then order date. And you can see there are five customer entry, five customer record entries are there. If I want to pull out a specific value, or I want to pull out the 301 or 401 or particular customer ID value, you cannot able to retrieve it from the Boomi
Mhm.
unless until you have a profiles, because when you have a profile, profile types will be matching your data types, and profile types will be defining the columns. When you click on, when you give the specific column, it automatically retrieve that particular column. I'll show you that end of the time once how we have used this one. Okay, even I can share you the one more video. You can just practice that one also.
Okay.
Okay, so now let's create an XML file here. Tomorrow I'll show you how to create a plot file, and in the video that I'm going to share you, that I already showed you how to create a plot file. In this video I'm going to show you how to create an XML file, and again tomorrow I'll be showing how to create plot file and do the translation of process from the reading a file from plot file and doing the conversion of XML and then generating the file again. I'll be showing these things. Okay, now we have an option of manually we can define using this one. I'll be showing this one manual one. We'll go with the import wizard now. Okay, so when creating a profile, we can go with the import wizard. When you have an import wizard, what and all types of files it is asking? XML files and
Okay.
schema file. I already showed you what is XML file and what is schema file.
Mhm.
Okay, let me show you if I select XML file and create a profile, what is difference? If I select a schema file and if I create a profile, what is the difference? Okay, now let's check the same book. I'm going to import this particular file. In Notepad++, you can directly take a shortcut of full file path to clipboard. It will give you the full file path of this file. Click on choose file, paste it here. You can see this particular file automatically selected here. Click on next. You can see the root element, it automatically identifies the root element name books. Okay, automatically
Mhm.
identified. Click on finish. Click on finish. But if you see, it has defined multiple books elements. But is it really required to specify multiple books element? This is
Not.
a structure. This is a structure. I can define a one book. I can define a one book, and I can tell you that this book can be repeatable.
Mhm.
I can tell my profile that you no need to define books n number of times, because in real time you may get 1 lakh book entries. In 1 lakh single file you may get 1 lakh book entries, but we cannot define 1 lakh times the books here. We can tell that what we can tell books can be repeatable up to infinity times. That we can do using a simple chain here. For min occurrence, max occurrence, I already showed you that the whatever the elements are available inside schema, all it will be available. Min occurrence, max occurrence, you can see here. It means I'll show you what a min occurrence means. Min occurrence nothing but this particular tab, how many number of minimum number of times this can occur. Zero nothing but it can be optional.
Okay.
Okay, let's say I have an XML file called address 1, address 2, address 3, and then city, country, state. Okay, some of the people what they can have a huge lengthy address, then they can able to fill address 1, address 2, address 3, right? Some of the people they have very short length, short address. Then what they can do, they can fill address 1, address 2 only. They cannot fill address 3 because they don't have much information. Means when you filling a forms also they'll put star is nothing but mandatory, you have to fill that particular field. Without star means it won't expect anything value. It means that we have to define mandatory and optional elements. Mandatory element nothing but min occurrence and max occurrence, you both have 1. If you are not providing a value for this min occurrence max, if any element that defines min occurrence and max occurrence is 1, if you are not passing a value, it will give an error. If you are setting a value min occurrence max occurrence 1 nothing but it's, we can call it as a mandatory elements. Means
Okay.
this element has to be available always in your XML file. Without having this particular value in XML file, if you send an XML file to a validation error, because since as per your XSD you have defined this particular element as a mandatory, but you are not sending an XML file. That's the reason I'm throwing a validation error.
Mm.
Okay, now if you specify 0 means minimum, how many number of times minimum it occurs? 0 means not really required. We can say this is a configuration, we can say optional element. 0 and 1 is optional element.
Okay.
If you select this one, right, it means max occurrence. Max occurrence unbounded. Unbounded nothing but you can say infinity. You can see here books can be any n number of times. I can define once, and in that case I don't need to define this. This will be sufficient. Any number of books also comes, it can able to accommodate all these things. Like when you import, when you create an XML profile using the sample XML file, this kind of a modifications you may need to do. Okay,
Okay.
other thing, what is the structure we define, what is the data type we define for price? It should be boolean. What
Yeah.
is this one? Means when you are creating a profile using an XML profile, using when you're creating a flat file profile using a sample XML file, using a sample XML file, because the sample XML file we did not mention anywhere that the price would be of this type and publisher date would be of this type. We did not define, right? That's the reason while creating also it should take by default string. One second. Hello.
Yeah, Vema.
Sorry, actually that's the reason. This is the two problems when you are creating a flat file, when you're creating an XML profile using a sample XML file. Let's that what is the one thing you may need to adjust minimum occurrence and max occurrence, and other things would be your elements will not be generated as per the data types. Okay, let's import XML schema. Okay, this time
Okay.
let's choose file. I already have a XSD file here. This time you can see that we already showed you the genre, price, all these things are showing string types by default. Click on next. You can see this. It will be showing, it will be parsing all these things, and you can select books is the root element. Click on next. Click on finish. You can see this. You forget about these colors. I'll tell you why the colors has been coming. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Earlier it comes red, now it comes only yellow color. Forget about colors, and now you can see this. We did not done any changes. It automatically set the max occurrence unbounded. Even you can see price is of you can see all the elements is set. Minimum occurrence, max occurrence is 1. It means it has to be
Mm-hmm.
available. Genre also minimum occurrence, occurrence is 1. Title means when you define a profile, when you define a flat XML profile using a schema, using XML
Mm-hmm.
schema, it is a perfect one. You don't require any kind of a modifications. Wherever it is possible, you always has to create a profile with XML schema only,
Okay.
not with the sample XML. because sample XML, when you create a XML profile with a sample XML file, you may need to do some kind of a changes. The changes, some of the changes like you
Minimum max.
yeah, minimum max occurrence kind of adjustment we need to do, and other things that your element types will not be by default. It take all the elements will be defined with a string type.
Okay, data type is string.
Not only this, I'm just only given one or two, and because when you define this one, right, as I told you that we schema has already defined user defined types. You can see already types also will be defined. But when you create an using XML profiles, your types will not be generated. Basically, types will be defined for reusable purpose. Reusable purpose. Once you create an XML profile using a schema, you cannot able to modify anything. You cannot able to add also anything. You can see that. You're not able, because
Okay, you can't.
all are non-editable fields. So I think you are aware of that. What's the difference? Because so many people, what they will do, they'll create an XML file, they'll create
Mm-hmm.
a profile with the sample XML file, and then they'll try to use it in map shapes, and then they say that they are not getting value. The reason is, when you're creating a with the XML profile, what happens? These kind of a changes will be there, and because of that there might be namespaces changes also might be there, and because of that the value will not be retrieved. That's the reason always recommends, while creating a XML profiles, only use schema, else you define manually. Or if you know what are the changes to be modified, yes, you can, to reduce your time, import your XML profile, sample XML file, import your sample XML file, do your changes if you know the changes. It might be the namespace changes, it might be the data types, it might be the minimum occurrence, max occurrence. These might be anything. Most of the times you will be providing all the schemas and everything. Whatever the structure you will be required, you will be getting all these details from the clients.
Okay, the schema structure and everything.
Yes, everything will be getting from there. Some, because sometimes if you are not getting, we may need to create, but that's the reason I am just trying to explain all these details. But that's
Okay,
very rare case that you may create your XSDs and everything. That will be. Because
okay,
sometimes what happens, if some of the application team, what they'll tell, right, okay, they wanted to create a schemas on your end, and they tell you to create a web service. Like some of the web services, what you'll be using XML schema as a request and response structure. There some of the vendors, they what they'll say that, so you create on your own, these are the elements we require, these are the data types we require. They'll give all these fields and data types in Excel and Excel sheet, and they'll tell you to create a schema, and once you're done, share the schema to us, so we'll be configure the same schema in our application also. Those are the very rare cases you may need to define your schema. That's the reason I'm
mm-hmm.
just trying to explain all these details. Otherwise, not
Okay,
no need to really understand all these XML schemas. Got it, right? So try to
yep.
understand this the XSD tutorial. Try to go XML XSD. Try to go to XML and XSD tutorials. Then we'll see, if any doubts we can see that tomorrow. Okay, I'll at the end of the time I'll be sharing this video as well as the other video. You can, even if you have a time, practice that also. It will be useful.
Sure.
Okay, then we'll see.
Yep.
We've already seen how to create a XML files. Then we'll see a process. We can see that tomorrow. Okay, so
Okay,
if
Vibha.
you try to create these XML files, we can Google it, any XML files in Google, and you try to analyze what exactly it is there in XML file, what and all types it defined. Then
Yes.
and you first go through this. After that, you analyze the sample XML files. You can get plenty of XML files in Google. After that, you try to analyze each of the things, and then it will be more clarity.
Okay.
You can see here we have a different, even XML files, they'll be given so many things. The only thing is you need to understand. And other things would be, because we know what is XML now. We know what is XML now. We already know what is XSD now. As I told you initially, when I get a one request, to fulfill that request, I may need to call multiple requests. Need to call multiple web service calls. In that case, web service calls might be different structure. In that case, I may need to do the transformation from one of XML to another XML. Do the transformation of data from one format to another format. This will be done by XSLT, but it won't require you initially to show automation, but sometimes you may need to write it if this is not happening. At the end of the
Okay.
sessions, I will. But these are the open standard tools. XSLT nothing but XML style sheet transformations. If you go through WTED, you can see a display with XSLT something. I'm just showing the terms. I'm just giving. Okay, this one. You know what is XML? XML is an actual physical file. To validate this XML file, we'll be using an XSD. So if you want to translate the data structure from one XML to another XML, we'll be writing an XSLT. Another one would be a WSDL. WSDL basically it describes the web services structure, web services information.
Okay. Example. What is an example?
Let's say your customer information. Okay, one of the customer information we have, one of the customer WSDL is there. What this way your customer service will provide? Customer service will provide like multiple functionalities like create customer, get call customers, get customers by ID. The way how you define it. So we'll show you the sample WSDL and all these things. I'll try to explain all these things. And other thing would be a important one would be XPath. This is very important. XPath. XPath nothing but now I know there are some books information is there. Now I want to retrieve a particular title. I don't want to, when I say title, I don't want to get title the first book and the poet's first poem. Wherever my particular ID got matched, then only I need to retrieve. Means access XPath nothing but is basically navigating through your XML file, and based on the expression you write, it will pull out the value. Basically to look into an XML file and get the specific value. For that purpose, we'll write an XPath. We'll be selecting XPath also automatically in Boomi. We don't need to write explicitly. But all these XPath, the combination of XPath is nothing but in XSLT.
Mm-hmm.
Combination of XPath is nothing but in XSLT. In XSLT, you will define all XPath. So, but the XPath also will automatically show you. I'll show you tomorrow how XPath internally using by Boomi.
Okay.
How XPath internally using by Boomi, and where exactly the XSLT internal transformations are happening out. We'll show you these two, how Boomi is internally handling all these two things. Okay. And
Okay.
try to understand, but as of now, don't go with XSLT and all XPath and all. But now
Yeah.
as
For
try to
time
go
being.
with XML, XSD. Just go through only these things. If any doubts, we
Yeah,
can see
Vema.
tomorrow. Yeah.
Okay. Vema, what I'll do is for time being, Vema, you can remove the recording now.